What's up, guys? This is Ryan from Bible Dingers, and we are here with another exciting video. And today I am joined by my friend Shannon Halliday, who is the director of Essential Church. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Hey, so before we get into talking a little bit about the film, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I was before COVID working for a studio in a huge marketing firm where we wrote and directed commercials for thousands of different clients and things like that. And I'd been going to Grace Church for quite a while. I got saved there. And during COVID, an opportunity arose that I could do some part-time work there. And then that was just kind of helping out with kind of creating stories for the children's books that we have for Sunday school stuff. So I was just kind of overseeing that. And then the idea came that maybe we could do something more than that. And I was asked to come on as a creative director. And first I said no. I didn't think that'd be a good career choice. Quit my job and go work for church.
Yeah.
But after a while, after about a month, it started to like work on me. And then I was asked again and I was like, okay, yeah, I think I will do it. It sounds like it would be a really satisfying venture just to serve in that way and to be telling stories on subjects that I'm interested in. And creatively, it sounded like it would actually be more interesting than what I was doing. So as a storyteller and a filmmaker, I was kind of interested in that. And that happened in the middle of COVID, and it's been going on that ever since.
Awesome. Awesome. So we're here to talk about the Essential Church, which from what I understand is a documentary about COVID and all the church closures and essentially making a case that the church is essential and should be open. So can you tell me a little bit more detail about the film?
Yeah, it really is just the overall story in three senses. We tell our story of our local church, Grace Community Church, and we tell a global story, which involves the Canadian churches, Tim Stevens and James Coates. And then I involve the historical aspect of it, and we look into church history. And so I tell the story of the church and how it dealt with the government during this time where the government said, hey, because of this emergency, we actually have jurisdiction in the church, and we can tell you what you can and cannot do when it comes to worshiping. When it comes to gathering together and doing what you do, we're in control of that now because of this emergency act. And there's nothing in the Bible that says that we are ever to hand that kind of authority over to the government. And it's really the story of us as a church, a local church, deciding what we're going to do with Romans 13, because our church was divided on that. And a lot of people left our church because they disagreed with the decision to finally open. But there was a process of where the elders had to become united, because our elders, we have a principle in our elder board is that we always have to be unanimous when we come to a decision of whatever we're going to do at the church. And so there was a unanimous decision to heed the government's warning. But after 2 weeks, that changed. And then we had a divided elder board. And this movie actually pulls back the curtain on that a little bit. And we can kind of see their process as elders and how they worked through this to become unanimous and decide to open up the church, and then to decide to actually sue the government. And Grace Community Church is, if you would have asked anybody before COVID, if anybody at Grace Community Church thought we would ever sue the government, there would be no way we would ever. I mean, John MacArthur's our pastor. We don't do that. We're not really political. But we made a decision to sue the government, and that really offended a lot of people. And we had people leave our church. But not only as I tell that story of that legal battle, well, first how we became unanimous and then the legal battle, I'm talking about the Canadians and their legal battle and what they did and their imprisonment. And I'm weaving it through what happened with the Covenanters and the Great Ejection in 1662, and just kind of going over that century and kind of going in and out of stories of the Covenanters and how they dealt with the government and how the government dealt with them.
So I know there's been, a lot of persecution of the church ever since Christ, left us here and caused the church to grow throughout the centuries. What exactly happened in the 1600s that's so relevant to what happened in 2020?
Yeah. So there was a gentleman called Charles I, and he decided that the king was to be head of the church. And he was told that the king can be a member of the church, but he can't be the head of the church, because scripture shows us that there's only one head of the church, and that's Christ. So on July 23rd, 1637, he sent his dean, to St. Giles in Edinburgh, Scotland, to show them how they were going to do worship. And it was through the Book of Common Prayer. So they were going to regulate their worship based on the government's wishes. All right. So there's a parallel right there.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give too much away, but there's a stand that takes place there. And that sparks this movement that becomes known as the National Covenant. And 6 months later, in 1638, leaders throughout Scotland went to Grey Friars in Edinburgh and signed what is called the National Covenant. And it's a statement about how Christ is the head of the church and the king is not, and that they respectfully disagree, but he can only be a member of the church. And some of these men signed this document in their own blood.
Wow.
So this was a huge stand for the church against the state. And so likewise, we came out with a statement. We made a stand. And our stand pales in comparison to theirs, but their story really puts steel in your veins. And I really wanted that story to be a part of this film. And I think that the way I was able to tell it was really satisfying. And that's where I really, as a filmmaker, got to really delve into just the art of storytelling and visual storytelling. And the way we go about it, I'm really proud of how it came out. And I think people will really like the storytelling aspect of the church history.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it, honestly. And it's so true. When I look back in 2020 and all the craziness that was going on and all the churches being shut down, I know you guys are in LA, and that was probably the strictest, little pocket in the entire country, besides perhaps New York City, which is where my church is. And so we ended up staying open too, despite what the government was telling us. And we felt some solidarity there because of the leadership of John MacArthur on the West Coast, being an example to us as a church on how we should handle this. I know I felt so much more confident with the decision that our church made as well to stay open, because we felt that support from other strong churches in our country. So I'm really excited to see the behind the scenes of what went on. If you guys want to check it out yourself, we're going to go ahead and play a trailer right here so you can get a little bit of sneak peek, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about it. So you guys check it out.
God's truth is enduringly true throughout all the generations. It transcends culture. The church is always going to be an embattled people. If it's swimming with the tide, it's not being the church of Jesus Christ. Look to the past, learn from the past, because the whole world lies in the power of the evil one.
China has more than 200 confirmed cases of coronavirus, it's called.
The entire state of California ordered to stay at home. That's 40.
California has some of the strictest policies leveled against churches. Gavin Newsom's executive order threatens jail time and a $1,000 a day fine.
Government stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci.
When I went into the White House, when I sat in on the task force meetings, was a shocking level of gross incompetence.
The mortality rate from the virus was 0.2%. 99.8% survival, rather than the 3 or 4% mortality that the people are saying at the time.
The culture and the understanding of the people of Grace Church has always been, not only do you obey government, but you honor government.
Thousands of people in the streets, but you can't have church.
The hypocrisy of letting people riot helped us all understand one thing. This is not what they say it is.
By meeting, we're testifying the government has no jurisdiction here. I was arrested and driven to a maximum security prison.
The government has obviously turned up the heat on churches.
My daddy.
When the churches fall silent, the only religion left is the state.
We needed to make a biblical statement because we always put ourselves under the authority of the Word of God.
LA County threatened Pastor John MacArthur with jail time and arrest.
We were going to be sued. They wanted Grace Church shut down.
We wanted to go on the offensive and attack the health order as unconstitutional. This wasn't about health and safety. This was all about control and opposition to religious freedom.
As the government gets more corrupt and more corrupt,
snitches get rewards.
Its totalitarian control has to increase.
And you have to have a mask on.
And as they shut down any attacks against them,
this is not about freedom or personal choice.
The last thing standing is going to be the church.
All right, guys. So I know you could tell from that trailer already that you want to go ahead and get your tickets. You should. I know it's going to be playing in different theaters around the country. Is that right, Shannon? Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, we're in the process right now of trying to get into, well, we're trying to get into as many theaters as we can across the U.S. We're in one theater right now at Lemley in the Los Angeles area in Santa Clarita. So if you live in that area, you can actually buy a ticket now. But we are in the process of getting into theaters, and the best way to be up to date on that is if you go to essentialchurchmovie.com, essentialchurchmovie.com, and put your email in there, and then we can give you updates. And if there's a theater somewhere in your area that you can go and support us and go check out this film, and that will be released on July 28th. So we got a month. 28th. Yeah, July 28th. We got a month to figure out how to get a theater in New York. Are you in New York City?
Yeah, New York City. Our church is in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a reason to go to New York. I didn't have a reason before. Now I do.
Come on through, man. Come on through. We'd love to have you. Yeah, man. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna try and see it any way I can. We should talk offline about seeing what we can do about getting you on in New York City over here.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Last time I was in New York, I was 13 years old.
Is that right? And
yeah.
Have you spent your whole life in California?
Yeah, I grew up in San Diego.
Okay.
But I became a Christian in Los Angeles. I moved up to Los Angeles to pursue acting a long time ago.
Gotcha.
And became a Christian at Grace Community Church. But yeah, we went on a trip a long time ago, and I went to New York. And I remember I went up to the Empire State Building at the very top. I don't know if I should say this on your podcast, but you say you have a bunch of young people. So I get up there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to spit off of this thing, right? You're that hot. Yeah. I'm 13 years old. So I get up there and I get a big loogie and I spit.
Nice.
And it goes out and flies and hits this lady right in the face next to me. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I'm 13 years old, and I pulled my head back in the game. I was like, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
And down, and my family's like pseudo Christian, like I don't know. Yeah, we were kind of all over the place. We grew up in a Lutheran church, but we go down, and there's one of those guys on the boxes. I don't know if they're still there, where they have 3 cards. One is red and 2 are black, and they're doing the shuffle. Do they still do that? I don't know.
Not quite. So it's a different hustle now.
And she drops a bunch of cash on where she thinks this thing is. We lose the money. So I spit off I shouldn't be saying this on the podcast. I need you to go and see this movie. I'm telling you this horrible story. So I spit off the Empire State Building, and my mom gambled our money away. And then we had to leave that day because we.
Wow. That New York was not good to you, my friend.
No, that was my last time. So I got to go back and redeem my New York time.
That's it, man. Well, we would love to have you whenever you're ready, man. You're more than welcome. Um. Anyway, so back to the movie. Back to the movie. So what made you want to actually create this movie? What was your inspiration?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, a lot of people left Grace Community Church because we decided to open, and no matter what you said to them, they didn't agree, and they weren't going to come back. They thought we really went off the rails on this one. And John MacArthur's wrong. We're all wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. This isn't biblical. And so I also think that people look at Grace Community Church and they just kind of see this pillar of perfection. And, you know, it's always this nice, clean process and everybody's unanimous and we're all on the same page. And I thought, actually, it was Jacob Hoffman it was his idea. He said, we should do this to try to like make a movie so those people could watch it. And I thought that's a great idea. And then I put together a pitch that I wanted to do. And then we pitched it to John MacArthur and a few of the elders. But we wanted to make a movie that those people could just watch the story unfold before them and they could see what really happened. And maybe that would help them kind of understand the process that we went through to do what we did, and that it wasn't easy. There was an evolution there.
Yeah. And I imagine, and we can get into this a little bit, I imagine there was a little bit of a split, like you said earlier, over Romans 13, where it talks about how everyone needs to submit to the government because the government was installed by God, and so we just have to listen to them. And so can you, without giving too much away, can you describe a little bit about what that conversation was like at Grace?
Yeah. Do you know who Mike Riccardi is?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Sure do.
So Mike Riccardi is a pastor at our church. He's also on the elder board. And he was very much on the side, we need to comply and shut down. So at the very beginning, he was one of those elders was like, no, we shouldn't be opening back up. And he made a switch. So I tell his story of his evolution, of how a friend really challenges him, which forces him to study. And one of the things he studied was Martin Lloyd-Jones' commentary on Romans 13. And if you want to read a book on Romans 13, you should read Martin Lloyd-Jones' book on Romans 13. You can get it from Banner of Truth. So it's an excellent commentary, and it's basically his sermons that they put into a commentary form, and they're fantastic. So he was reading that, and that really challenged him, and he started to understand that really the Bible actually talks about these spheres. And one clue on that is when Jesus is asked, hey, should we pay our taxes? And he says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. People say, well, see, that's the Jesus saying, just pay your taxes. And that's true. But he's also saying another thing. There's a separate realm. There's a separate sphere here. There's the government, there's Caesar, and then there's the church, which is God's. And he doesn't say they're both connected. He says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. So there's a separation there. So we show his evolution and how he learns about these spheres of authority and how they're ordained by God. And just like the church doesn't have jurisdiction in the government and they need to submit, the government doesn't have jurisdiction in the church.
So what would you say is the reason to not just comply anyway? Because I hear, folks on the other side who think like maybe Pastor Mike, originally thought that you should be complying because the loving thing to do is to watch out for the health of your community, and your church is being unloving by opening up, and you're putting everybody at risk and things of that nature. So what would you say to somebody who thinks that you're actually in the wrong and you're doing the unchristian thing by staying open?
Yeah, and the documentary speaks to that. First, we were able to speak with 2 epidemiologists and a public health official. epidemiologist is Scott Atlas, and then another epidemiologist, Jay Bhattacharya, as well. And then we have Sean Kaufman, who's a public health official for like the last 30 years. And I interview them on the data of what the lockdowns really did and whether or not it would have been unloving to come together and gather together, because actually we're going to kill everybody by doing that. And so that's unloving because we're actually going to kill people by gathering together and having church. And that's what we were told. But there are hard, objective facts of why that's not true. And, you know, there are a lot, and not all of them are in the documentary, but Scott Atlas speaks to just the fact that the data showed that the death rate was not what it was. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's provable by the data. We did not have a 3.4% death rate, which is what we were told at the very beginning. And they just stuck with that and they never corrected it. And that became the norm. So that wasn't true. And he proves that. And then we have just what the lockdowns did in compared to what the virus was doing. And we go into the details of the psychological impact it had on people. And we get into the skyrocketing suicides, the skyrocketing self-harm of teenagers, the skyrocketing anxiety and depression. And then on top of that, you have other things that are just, it just wrecked economies. It wrecked people's lives as well as killed people. And Jay Bhattacharya even says in the documentary that it was the worst human, I forget his exact line, but it was the worst catastrophic event in peacetime history. And he says it's not even comparable. Wow. But you don't hear that in the media. You don't hear those things, but those guys speak to that. Scott Atlas was actually on the task force for President Trump with Birx and Fauci, and he would meet with that group every day at a round table. So he has a lot of insider information on how that went down, and how they viewed lockdown. So anyway, so there's the data aspect of it. But then I would just say, for example, we have, towards the end of the film, I have some testimonies of different people. And one gentleman who basically woke up from a stroke in the hospital in COVID when everything was shut down, goes home. You know, he's somewhat disabled and he's depressed. He gets into drinking alcohol and everything's shut down and he doesn't understand what's going on in the world. And he's considering suicide. And then he sees on the news about this little Baptist church that refuses to close down. And so everything else is shut down. So he's like, I want to go to them and ask questions and figure out, I want to know answers and why they're doing what they're doing. So he goes there, he hears the gospel. He's now a Christian and he's saved. He didn't commit suicide. He's no longer an alcoholic and he's walking with the Lord and he's part of a church community now. Wow. His whole life has changed. And we have a couple other testimonies that speak to that as well. You have to understand that the church, if you really believe what the Bible says, then the church really is the salt and light, the only true salt and light in the world that can actually help people. And you're just going to shut it down. So when the data says that's not even true, that we're going to kill everybody, then it becomes, well, we should just go along so we look like we're being nice. Well, that's a farce. We need to open up. We need to be the salt and light in the world so that those people can have hope, because we offer the only real hope that nobody else offers. And if we shut that down and we put something over our lampstand to cover the light, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree, man. Totally agree. And, you know, those first few weeks when we were all not meeting, you know, it just didn't feel right. You know, it was almost even convicting in a sense, even though at the time we were all unsure of what we were supposed to be doing and things of that nature. It just felt unnatural to not be meeting with the church on Sunday, because it's so ingrained and so important, I think, to the Christian's life that it's almost like shocking when you don't do it for a few weeks.
Yeah, so I think COVID taught me that how I was taking my ability to go to church every Sunday for granted.
Yeah.
and that I wasn't valuing it like I should. I wasn't valuing gathering together with Christians and seeing that as a sacred moment like I was before. I was not really seeing it as well as I do now. Because when we came back together, I mean, I saw the response in people's hearts. People were weeping, people were hugging, and it was just, I was like, yeah, you know, that's how I need to see church.
Yeah.
So it was really eye-opening for me.
So I'm curious, you spent a lot of time researching some of the church history when it comes to persecution, and you know, you spent a lot of time looking into the politics and covering some of the backstory on Grace. Huge project. What's one or two of your favorite takeaways, something that you learned or something that changed you emotionally or something like that from doing this project?
Yeah. Well, when I learned about the church history stuff, I got really excited because I got really excited as a filmmaker. I thought, oh, I want to tell those stories because I think I could really, it just would be really satisfying as a filmmaker to tell those stories. And I think it fits perfectly with this story. And there's a thing with the dates, and I don't want to give it away, but July 23rd is a really big day, and it connects in a way that is very, I mean, it's the sovereignty of God.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. So that I got really excited about. But, you know, something that maybe I took away from it that isn't really in the documentary, but I learned is that when we say that America is born out of a Judeo-Christian worldview, I don't know if we really understand the extent of that. Because the reality is that in the 1600s, what the Scottish people did is really what formed our view of America. And I don't think people understand that the Covenanters, how big of a role the Scottish Covenanters played in the design of America itself. Because we are built on this concept of the separation of church and state. They had to work that out and flesh out that concept biblically, which is fascinating because, you know, the atheist will go to like a courthouse and say, we need to remove the Bible because of the separation of church and state. But the reality is we don't even have the concept without that book. And we don't have that concept fleshed out without church history. And we don't have America unless those people fleshed it out. It wasn't just, hey, we have a Judeo-Christian worldview. How should we do this? It was fleshed out. People died over this. They suffered over this. They had to theologically really go deep and think about why this is true. And that's really how we get our form of government. It really inspired that. So I didn't know the extent of that, or didn't, you know, just ponder the extent of that before this film. So I thought that was interesting. So that's a takeaway that I have.
That is really interesting, and it's really piquing my interest, and I honestly cannot wait to see this film. Can you let us know again how we can actually watch it?
Yeah, so in theaters, July 28th. We're going to try to be in as many theaters as we can. So the best way to be informed about this is go to essentialchurchmovie.com, essentialchurchmovie.com, and put in your email, and you'll get updates as far as if there's a theater near you. Eventually, we're going to have DVD sales and Blu-ray sales, so you'll be able to get it through that. And then, you know, we'll see what happens after that as far as streaming and things like that. That'll be in September, I believe. Cool. But the more people go to the movies, the more it starts to snowball, because the other theaters will then say, oh, hey, I want that movie in my theater, you know, and it just starts to expand. And then we can reach more people with the gospel, because this movie does actually have the gospel in it. We go into who the head of the church is and why he is the head of the church. And that has a lot to do with the gospel, obviously, because he paid for the church. The church is his. So, and he paid with his own blood, obviously. So we get into the gospel and all that. So it's an evangelistic opportunity as well. So you can bring friends and family.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Shannon, like I said 100 times, I'm really excited for this movie. It really, I have an emotional connection to it because of what we both experienced in our own incredibly locked down cities. And I'm looking forward to it again. Can't wait to show it to the family. Shannon, thank you so much for being on, telling us a little bit about the film. Give us the website one more time that we can learn more about it.
Yeah, it's essentialchurchmovie.com. Essentialchurchmovie.com comes out July 28th.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Shannon. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.